Joining us now, Puck Chief Washington correspondent Leanne Caldwell and Mimi Rocah, former assistant U.S. attorney in the Southern District of New York, where she worked closely with the aforementioned Todd Blanche. We really appreciate you both being with us. Leanne, starting with you, this is quite the mess on Capitol Hill. And I guess the lesson here is that, if you're president of the United States and you mess with incumbent senators, members of your own party, Cornyn and Tillis, and you help oust them and basically end their political career, well, they will then be less inclined to help you going forward. So give us the latest as to what's happening there on the Hill.
Yeah, well, Jonathan, the president was actually warned about this scenario months ago when he decided not to endorse John Cornyn, when he decided not to help out Thom Tillis. Thom Tillis obviously decided to retire at the end of his term. So this is not unexpected. But the course forward acts very unclear. I mean, what is becoming clear is that the president has no intention of closing down this anti-weaponization fund. He has no intention of giving away any sort of immunity for being audited or probed into his tax filings, because if that was okay with him, it's very simple that he just has to put it on paper. And that's not something he's obviously willing to do, according to these two senators. And so there seems to be an easy way out, but the president seems to care more about this fund and his own financial protection than he does about permanent confirmation of his attorney general. So, it's unclear. The president had threatened to remove him from his remove the nomination. He could still serve in an acting position. He can do that in the next Congress too, if Trump nominates him. So, all of this is unclear, but the reality is that this is not getting any easier between the Senate and the president, who continues to battle not on this issue, but on other issues as well. Jonathan.
Yes, certainly. It's quite the loophole there with the idea that an acting can just stay in that role with no real change to his status. Let's also bring a New York Times reporter covering the Justice Department, Glenn Thrush, bringing Glenn into this conversation. Glenn, good to see you again. To you here, Blanche, what is Blanche refusing? I mean, I understand that the president, certainly has his wish list, but have people you've talked to, was there a sort of strategy behind this? Is Blanche and the DOJ and frankly the president, they're just willing to go along with the acting in order to preserve the possibility of that fund and those IRS protections?
Did you say strategy?
You're right. Sorry, my bad.
I mean, look, Todd Blanche got this job in the first place because he was willing to execute what Donald Trump wanted him to do. So, this is a bit of a Faustian bargain, I think critics of Blanche would say, that in order to get the nomination, he went along with what Donald Trump wanted. The problem is, in order to actually secure the confirmation, he would have to buck Trump, and he's showing no signs of doing that. Donald Trump is proving once again a point that doesn't need to be proven anymore, which is everybody who works for him, from the attorney general on down to the person who serves him his Diet Cokes, they are his employees. And Donald Trump regards Todd Blanche as an employee. Donald Trump wants to keep this tax provision, period. End of story. The notion, Tillis sort of fobbing this off on some mythical White House person other than Donald Trump, belies the reporting that has been done and belies the pattern and practice of this White House. Trump wants this tax provision. We are led to believe, however, that on the $1.8 billion weaponization fund, there's a little bit more wiggle room, principally because the Justice Department can do a la carte deals and give people money, as we have documented in a recent story that we did yesterday, to anyone they want anyway. So the $1.8 billion quote unquote slush fund is not really the thing that's on the table. What Trump wants here is this broad tax immunity. Cornyn has horned in on this issue with a laser focus and said that this represents a potential act of self-dealing that is political poison for Republicans. Giving the president tax immunity when regular citizens aren't getting that is terrible, terrible politics. But Trump is willing to, A, sacrifice his potential permanent attorney general for this, and B, put Republicans in the firing line in the midterm elections for having supported this.
Yeah, certainly Trump putting his own priorities above his party's. Mimi, we just stated you used to work with Todd Blanche, and I'll just read to you what Glenn just said. I mean, a Faustian bargain that in order to get this job permanently, he'll do whatever Trump wants him to do. Does that surprise you from what you remember when you worked with Todd Blanche? Did you ever think he would make an agreement like this? Amy, I think we're having a little trouble with your audio here. Let's see if we can get that back up. Let's try it.
I got it.
There we go. Go ahead.
So it would have surprised me based on the Blanche I knew back then. It doesn't surprise me anymore. I mean, this is not the first thing, obviously, that he has done that has shown that he, meaning Todd Blanche, is willing to put aside legal principles, ethical principles, everything we learned, frankly, at the Southern District of New York and elsewhere at DOJ to make Trump happy and satisfied. He seems to care more about Trump's opinion of him than anything else. And it seems that is now essentially coming back to haunt him. He did something that no legitimate prosecutor would do in entering into this, what a judge called a sham settlement. I mean, this is not a real settlement agreement. I don't want to lose sight of that. So I respect that Cornyn and others are asking for it to be amended essentially to their satisfaction. But the fact that Blanche was willing to enter it in the first place is not something that someone who is looking out for the Department of Justice, the rule of law, and the American people ever would have done in the first place.
Glenn, real quick, what is the difference, the fact that we're putting this pledge in writing versus just vowing it? What is the enforcement mechanism here for Congress's point of view?
Well, there are two different. Let's extricate the fund deal from the tax deal. The fund deal. Blanche has said it's dead. He said this in public. Getting that, I think, language down on paper is probably a little bit easier. There was some talk about jamming it into an appropriates bill, but I think that is something that has been the subject of a lot of the back and forth on this. The tax deal, and our reporting on this is ambiguous. There have been drafts passing back and forth between the Department of Justice with White House involvement and Trump's personal lawyers involved, and Cornyn's office with Grassley as an intermediary. It is not clear at all if the White House, and Trump in particular, was willing to give any ground on going back into this quote unquote settlement that Mimi referred to put restrictions on the IRS immunity. Not to get too deep in the weeds, but the basic thing that Cornyn wanted was, one, to ensure that the tax immunity was only retrospective, that it wouldn't apply going forward, and two, that it wouldn't be extended to a wider group of Trump-related friends or entities. So basically, the truth of the matter is Cornyn wanted something exceedingly modest. He didn't want to kill any of these deals. He didn't want to scrap them. He's not even predicating his yes vote on complaints about whether or not Blanche is sufficiently independent, which he raised in the hearings. It's a really narrow little strip of ground. He just wants some written assurances that there will be minimal restraints on the IRS deal. And the fact of the matter is the White House wasn't willing to give him it.
Leanne, let's talk about the relationship right now between the president of the United States and the Republican Senate. I'm going to venture that it's not great. It's not just, obviously, Cornyn and Tillis here. Trump blasted them on Truth Social. He's proud of the fact that he ended their political careers. But we also have John Thune refusing to blow up the filibuster, telling the president over and over, look, we don't have the votes for the SAVE Act. And at the same time, sort of Trump's best liaison to the Senate, well, that was Lindsey Graham. And he was laid to rest just a few days ago after his sudden passing. Where does this relationship go from here?
Yeah, that's a really interesting point about Lindsey Graham. Not only was he extremely close with the president, but he was also extremely close with John Thune as well. And so his absence is going to be greatly missed. Where things go from here, it's unclear. What Senator Thune is doing, though, is he is protecting his members. He is making sure that his he's taking the bows and arrows, making sure that his members don't have to take votes that aren't good for them politically. He is unwilling to change the Senate rules at the president's whim. And there's a lot of mistrust that even if the Senate were going to do all the things that the president wanted, that the president wouldn't move the goalposts anyway. So where it goes from here, it is really an unknown question, but more and more senators that I talk to and outside of Republican observers admit and acknowledge that what this is doing is really setting the president up to blame the Republicans in the Senate Republicans, if Republicans were to lose one or both houses in November. We know that the president has a very long track record of creating the victim months before the incident. In previous elections, he has done this. And this is what people think is what is happening now, because the reality is that math is math, and Senate Majority Leader John Thune doesn't have the votes on the SAVE Act, doesn't have the votes right now for Todd Blanche. And so there's just, it doesn't look like it's going to get any better soon, Jonathan.